Thank you, Leader Jeffries. Now I'd like to recognize my colleague and friend, the co-chair of the Steering and Policy Committee, Dan Kildee from Michigan.
Well, first of all, thank you, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, for your leadership on this issue and for hosting us here today and for having really fortuitous timing in terms of calling this hearing. This could not come at a more important moment. I also want to thank Leader Jeffries for his leadership and for his presence here today, along with all my colleagues. And particularly, I want to thank the witnesses for being here, for being willing to share your perspective and your personal stories. Look, it's been said, but I'll say it again. Let's be clear. Your individual rights as Americans, including the right to health care, to abortion services, to IVF, and even something as fundamental as the right to decide when you want to start a family, those rights are under attack. 2 years ago, 5 conservative Supreme Court justices stripped away a long-established constitutional right, taking away Americans' ability to make their own health care decisions. Since then, many states have taken action to restrict health care and to ban abortion, including right here in the state of Florida. These new draconian laws and bans have already restricted critical care and denied health care to millions of Americans. Other states have gone even further. Most recently in Alabama, as you recall, judges declared that embryos created through in vitro fertilization should be considered children. Since the ruling, countless families have had their lives thrown into chaos and have been forced to consider whether their medical procedures will be criminalized. Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in a case pushed by Republican lawmakers to ban mifepristone. The same high court that took away Americans' constitutional rights to an abortion will now decide whether to restrict access to abortion medication nationwide, an idea that has been supported by the current Speaker of the House of Representatives and his colleagues. We're going to change that, for sure. But make no mistake, the goal of these extremists is to restrict access to IVF and to enact a nationwide ban on abortion. They'll not stop until they're taken away women's freedom to control their own bodies, their own lives, and their own futures. But across the country, Americans are beginning to stand up to this extremism. In my home state of Michigan, voters stood up to reject extremism and protect reproductive freedom. Last election, Michiganders overwhelmingly enshrined abortion rights in our state's Constitution. Amen to that. Citizens collected over 750,000 signatures to place a statewide referendum on the ballot. And in 2022, Michiganders showed up in overwhelming numbers to protect abortion rights by over 13 percentage points. In that same election, pro-choice candidates were elected up and down the ballot, including for governor, for lieutenant governor, for Secretary of State, for Attorney General, and for the first time in 40 years, Michiganders elected a pro-choice majority in the State House of Representatives and the State Senate. Now other states, including the state of Florida, will have the opportunity to have their voices heard at the ballot box. Under the leadership of President Biden, Vice President Harris, and of course, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, we're working to restore your rights and reproductive freedoms as well. Democrats have introduced the Access to Family Building Act, which would protect IVF access nationwide. Unfortunately, the majority who control the House of Representatives have blocked us from being able to have a vote on that legislation. We've also introduced the Women's Health Protection Act, legislation to safeguard abortion rights nationwide. Again, the majority has blocked our ability to pass this critical bill. And we have filed legal challenges to protect access to mifepristone. When the American people evaluate their elected officials, they should look at what they do, not just what they say. The former president bragged about overturning Roe, and following suit, Republicans have set their sight on a national abortion ban and severe restrictions on women's right to access reproductive health care that they need. After an outcry from the American people, many Republicans said they support IVF treatment, but despite their public claims of support, 125 of them co-sponsored legislation, the Life at Conception Act, which defines a human being to include all stages of life, including a frozen embryo. They say one thing, they do another. There are forces who want to force women to live in a world where they are denied access to safe reproductive care, even if their lives are at risk. As a father and as a grandfather, I refuse to let my daughter and granddaughter live in a world where they have less rights than their mothers and grandmothers did. And that's why today's hearing is so important. We're using every tool we have available to us to stand up to this kind of extremism and to protect access to reproductive freedoms. This is a question of freedom. That's what this is all about. So Democrats, including and especially Leader Jeffries and President Biden, will not allow us to roll back the clock on a woman's right to make their own decisions about their own body and about their own future. And that's why this meeting and this moment is so important. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you so much.